I may have misinterpreted that, and I apologize for that.
Now, again, do I think that Oliver Stone should be your credible House committee source on the JFK assassination? I don't. I don't think that Oliver Stone should be a credible source on pretty much anything, because I don't know his historical bona fides on these things. So here's the thing. I want to take a step back for a moment. Right now, conspiracy theories are running wild on X about virtually every possible topic. Now, there's a difference between a conspiracy and a conspiracy theory. A conspiracy is a thing that actually exists in the real world. In fact, we have an entire statute devoted to uncovering conspiracies and prosecuting. Right, that would be the RICO Act. Right? It was an act directly tied to the idea of conspiracy connected to crime. And so there are lots of conspiracies. Right? And the thing about a conspiracy is you can tell when it's happening because of the evidence, which is the thing that you actually should be taking a look at. So, for example, when you say that there was a conspiracy from Anthony Fauci and his buddies to silence people who did not take his viewpoint on, for example, the Wuhan virus. That is true because there are emails showing that Anthony Fauci did that exact thing. When you say, for example, that there was a conspiracy of silence around Joe Biden's health condition, that is obviously true, not just because of your eyes and you watching the media basically cover it up, but because we know from actual contemporaneous and now contemporaneous reporting that everyone around Joe Biden knew exactly what was happening. Right? The evidence makes it not a conspiracy theory, but a conspiracy. Conspiracy theorists, however, that's a different thing, and conspiracy theories are a different thing. Conspiracy theories aren't just creeping into the fringe anymore. They're staging a full-blown takeover in the public square. You've seen it pretty much everywhere. You know that we've reached peak absurdity when even Alex Jones, who himself has done a lot of this, is suddenly demanding evidence from certain malefactors. This isn't skepticism, conspiracy theories. They're not skepticism. Skepticism would be that you question a thing and look for the evidence. Not skepticism is where you question a thing and don't look for any evidence before you throw out a theory that is not backed by the evidence. This isn't skepticism. Conspiracy theorizing is not skepticism. It is usually intellectual cowardice dressed up as critical thinking. And if we don't torch the rhetorical playbook, we end up with a society where the facts are optional, where actual people who know things are mocked, where every basement-dwelling keyboard warrior thinks that fan fiction trumps reality. And again, there are people who are in the basement on the keyboards who are actually doing real hard, good work that's important if they're basing it on the evidence. But that's not happening right now. In order for us to have a functioning polity, you have to have a common set of facts. Conspiracy theories are directly tied to no facts. So today, I want to talk about how we can tell the difference between a conspiracy, an actual conspiracy, and a conspiracy theory, and what are sort of the hallmarks of somebody who's retailing a conspiracy theory to you. This is what I call the QED of conspiracy thinking. It's a simple framework. Q is for fake questions, E is for fake evidence, and D is for fake defenses. So this framework is designed to expose the intellectual dishonesty at the core of conspiracy thinking. And once you see it, it's difficult to unsee it, because you'll see these tactics almost everywhere with regard to people retailing particular narratives. So let's dive in. First, Q, fake questions. The fake questions are the foundation of conspiracy theories. The first pillar in the conspiracy theory playbook are fake questions. These are not genuine inquiries that are seeking truth or evidence or facts. They're rhetorical devices designed to create doubt, even where there's no evidence that the doubt should exist. So the most obvious example of this is just asking questions. This is when somebody poses a loaded question while they're pretending to be a neutral observer. So say, I'm just asking questions. Why won't the government discuss the second shooter on the grassy knoll in the JFK assassination? Why can't we even talk about the JFK assassination? Okay, the question presupposes a premise. One, there's somebody trying to hide the truth from you. Two, that they're trying to silence you. And many of the people who use this kind of stuff are speaking to literally millions of people. So why can't we talk about the JFK assassination? Well, I noticed you guys are talking about the JFK assassination, or whatever it is you're talking about, in front of millions of people. And nobody's actually silencing you, I noticed. They're just asking for the evidence of the thing that you're arguing, and you're not providing the evidence of the thing that you're arguing. So the just asking questions is a rhetorical sleight of hand. Here is the problem. The tactic puts the burden of proof on the wrong side. So typically, in logical discourse, if I make a contention, I have to provide evidence of my claim. I can't just make a claim and then ask somebody else to disprove it. So if I'm going to debate and I make a claim, I should have evidence to back the claim. I can't just throw out a claim like the aliens landed in Area 51. Show me the evidence they didn't land in Area 51. Well, no, the burden of proof is on me to show they landed in Area 51. It's my job to show the evidence and then challenge the other side to refute it. That's how an actual conversation typically works. But that's not what's being done here. Okay, next tactic in the just asking questions section, motive over evidence. Okay, this is when somebody who's retailing a conspiracy theory suggests that basically because someone benefits from an outcome or could benefit from an outcome, they're therefore responsible for the outcome. And they show no actual connection between the person and the outcome, but if you benefit, then you must have done it. So Lyndon Johnson became president after JFK died. Therefore, he assassinated JFK. That is not an actual logical piece of reasoning. It wouldn't pass muster in a freshman logic class. Motive may suggest where to look for evidence, but it is not evidence itself. By the conspiracy theory's logic, then if you benefit, for example, from a sale at your local grocery store, you must have designed the sale at your local grocery store. You benefiting from a thing does not mean that you did the thing. Even you benefiting from a bad thing. If your aunt dies and leaves you $1 million, doesn't mean you murdered your aunt. Then there's the appeal to ignorance. This one is particularly insidious, and you see this all the time, particularly on the interwebs. And this is arguing that something has to be true because it hasn't been definitively disproven. And here's the thing. You can't very often definitively disprove anything. I can make a case, as Richard Dawkins suggests, there's a spaghetti monster controlling all of human activity. Okay, if I say there's a spaghetti monster controlling all of human activity, disprove it. Okay, there's no way to disprove it. And then you say, well, I'm not even claiming there's a spaghetti monster who's doing this sort of stuff. I'm just saying it might happen. Can you disprove that? Well, this fundamentally misunderstands how knowledge works. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but neither is it evidence of presence. The burden of proof lies with the person making the extraordinary claim. And then there's the you don't know the whole story tactic. This is a classic. This is when somebody who's, again, retailing a conspiracy theory implies that there's hidden knowledge only the initiates can access. And so you'll hear people say, they're not telling you everything. Do your own research. Now, of course, this is effective because sometimes people aren't telling you everything and you should do your own research. But the thing is, nobody knows everything about complex events. The conspiracy theory exploits that gap to insert a preferred narrative. So the idea is that do your own research is a way of basically saying, yeah, you don't know as much about this other guy who wrote several books of credible evidence on the thing, but you shouldn't trust him. You should do your own research. And when people say this, typically what they mean is you shouldn't do your own research. You should listen to me because you're not going to do your own research. You might come to a different, instead, just listen to the theory that I'm retailing because I have done the research, which typically is rarely true. Okay, now on to the second step. These are all the fake questions. Now we get to fake evidence. And this is how you structure a conspiracy theory. Fake evidence is where somebody who's retailing a conspiracy theory attempts to build a case using what appears to be evidence, but doesn't stand up to scrutiny at all. So one tactic is cherry picking and secret sources. Okay, cherry picking data or claiming secret sources, really great way of doing this. So you'll see somebody who's retailing a theory, sees on a single data point while ignoring a mountain of evidence that contradicts that theory. So they will say, did you know that Trotsky was a Jew? And that means that the Sovietization of Russia was a Jewish plot. Now, Lenin wasn't a Jew. Stalin wasn't a Jew. Tons of people in the Soviet infrastructure were not Jews. And even those who claimed Jewish background were not observant Jews in any way. But again, you're not going to hear about any of that because you're cherry picking that. Okay, this very often will happen when you're attempting to credit a group with outsized power. Is you'll say, man, have you seen how many Jews there are in Hollywood? And it's true, there are a lot of Jews in Hollywood. Also, there are a lot of not Jews in Hollywood. Also, there are very few religious Jews in Hollywood. And you can do this with pretty much anything. You just cherry pick one thing and ignore all of the rest of the things. As we'll discuss in a moment about the JFK assassination, this is one of the things that you're seeing being retailed on the internet about, did you see that they blacked out Israel? They redacted Israel in those 80,000 pages of JFK? Yes. Well, it turns out they also redacted Romanian intelligence. They redacted Western German intelligence. They redacted pretty much all the intelligence agencies. But if you don't know that, then it looks like, that is pretty suspicious. Okay, so now let's talk about alleged secret sources. So you hear this all the time, right? I have a friend who works for the government, a credible person. This person told me, and I believe that person. Now, such claims are really unfalsifiable because you can't actually reveal, if you don't reveal the source, how am I supposed to falsify the claim? In actual journalism and academic research, you have to have multiple sources that confirm a thing. And this is why, by the way, people have become more and more skeptical of anonymous sources, even from legacy media sources, is because it's very difficult to fact check a claim based on anonymous sources saying things. Okay, but it's a great way of foisting off your claim on a more credible source who you won't even name or describe, because if you describe them, hey, it might let out of the bag what they are. You wouldn't want them to get in trouble. Okay, other false evidence. This would be false cause. This is rampant. So what they will do, people who are retailing conspiracy theory, is they will take two correlative events that are not causative. So they'll say, The government conducted a training exercise near New York, and then 9/11 happened. These are connected. And this is a very basic post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. Because one thing followed another, therefore, the first thing caused the second thing. So I wore my lucky socks and my team won. Therefore, my socks caused my team to win. That is not an actual argument. Correlation has to be proved to be causative, not just correlative. Appeal to authority. So one of the great kind of problems in our society right now is that the experts have blown themselves out on so many topics, which is absolutely true. There are so many people who claim to be experts on topics, and it turns out that they totally blew it, particularly with regard to, for example, COVID. This has opened the door to a bunch of people who will now basically term anyone an expert on a topic. And so the appeal to authority is usually a way of finding an authority who has a PhD in an unrelated doctorate, dissertation, jurisdiction, or whatever it is, different topic, and then saying that this person is an expert on this particular thing. And claiming expertise is really quite easy in today's modern world. You just say you spend a lot of time reading books, you've read a lot of books, and this makes you an expert on the topic. Well, if we can appeal to expertise, and I think that it's fair at this point, in a bunch of ways, particularly on political topics, you shouldn't appeal to expertise. You should actually, this is why evidence becomes more important, not less important. If you don't trust the experts, then you should ask for the evidence across the board. This should be a way of saying, don't cite your authorities. I won't cite my authorities. Just bring the evidence. That would be a way but people don't bring the evidence. They cite some sort of expert who is saying something out of the box, and I don't know enough to actually question them. You know, I know enough to question the narrative, but I don't know enough to question them, and they're an expert. That is a cheap and easy way of avoiding responsibility for the theory that you are retailing. And again, you see this all the time. Yeah, another tactic here is overestimating coordination. This is usually where conspiracy theories fall apart. Because what they'll do is they will posit a vast and complex secret conspiracy that would require hundreds or thousands of people to be involved in the thing. It's sort of like how Copernicus rewrote the rules of how the universe worked by discovering how they work because it was simple. Ptolemaic theory suggested this very complex system whereby the Earth was the center of the universe, and in order for that to work, you had to have various sort of spheres and domes and all this kind of, and so the theory kept getting more and more and more complex because it wasn't true. The same thing is true of most conspiracy theories. Most conspiracy theories have to get more and more and more complex. So let's say you believe that the moon landing was faked. Okay, that would not require a few dozen people to be in on it. That would require thousands, probably tens of thousands of people to be in on it and maintain a perfect lie for literally decades. So, question, have you ever tried to organize a surprise party? Like just for a friend? The chances are really good that the friend is going to find out about the surprise party if you have like 20 people at the party. Multiply that complexity by 1,000 and you don't know any of these people and they're part of a government organization, for example, and you think that nothing is going to leak ever? People talk, they make mistakes, they have crises of conscience. Usually conspiracies that are successful are relatively small, and then they become open when they're still relatively small and they gain power. So for example, the Soviets, the original Soviet, was a conspiracy of people who were pretty open about their ambitions. It started off secret, pretty quickly became not secret, and then they expanded their ambition. But the idea that you can have a secret, massive conspiracy involving tens of thousands of people across decades, now you're straining rationality. And then there's sort of us versus them thinking. This is basically, you label, this isn't even an appeal to evidence at all. This is basically you say, if you're in on it, if you're in the know, then you're us. And if you're a credulous dupe and you don't believe us, then you're the them. You're a sheeple. You're a sheeple. Right? This is a great way of simply alienating everybody who doesn't agree with you and calls for evidence. It's because you must be a part of it. It's you. It's very emotionally satisfying because you feel like you're in the know. You feel like you've gained the secrets of the universe, but it's totally intellectually stunting. And the truth is that reality is really complex. Most events result from a mixture of intentional actions, unintended consequences, systemic factors, lots of random chance. That's life. You know that in your own life. Reducing that complexity to heroes and villains makes for great movies, but it makes for really, really bad analysis. And then there is confirmation bias and something called apophenia. Confirmation bias is where you interpret information in a way that confirms your pre-existing beliefs. So if you believe in a conspiracy, everything becomes evidence for the conspiracy. Any contradictory evidence, you just dismiss it as part of the cover-up. So let's say that you believe that JFK was assassinated by the mafia, and then it turns out that actually Oswald didn't have any ties to the mafia. You say, well, that's just because we haven't looked hard enough. And anybody who makes that claim is probably in on it. And then you pair that with apophenia, which is seeing meaningful patterns in random data. And this happens all the time. Human beings, our brains, they look for patterns. But as sort of the famous joke goes, conspiracy theorists see words in their Cheerios. And so you can do this really easily. And you see the media actually do this sometimes. These three unrelated politicians all visited the same city in different years. It must be a conspiracy. Well, no, it's just a coincidence, which is a real thing that exists in our universe and obtains in your life pretty much every day. Okay, finally, so we've done the fake questions, the fake evidence, and then you finally get to the fake defenses. And this is where somebody asks for evidence just over and over. What's your evidence? Show me the evidence. And so now you need a defense. So your defense for not having evidence for your theory, or not plausible evidence, or not enough evidence, or not convincing enough evidence, you have a bunch of tactics you can use. One is non-falsifiability. The hallmark of pseudoscience, things that are not scientific. And again, there are many things in life that are not scientific. That's fine. You can't falsify love, for example. Like there's a personal feeling. But when it comes to claims about the world itself, you should have a falsifiable theory. Is Karl Popper pointing this out, the philosopher? Conspiracy thinking is non-falsifiable. You structure a claim so it can never be proved false. A good theory makes predictions that could be disproven. I've asked this to, you heard me ask this about the Derek Chauvin trial to, for example, Stephen A. Smith. I said, is there any evidence that could possibly change your mind about this? And he said, no. So, well, that's not a rational inquiry. Because if nothing can change your mind about a thing, it is now a religious belief. It is not a rational inquiry. And there's a place in life for religious beliefs. But that's not the place for unspooling a theory about, like an assassination. Conspiracy theories rarely do this, because their theories are designed to be immune to evidence. They don't want to actually provide a falsifiable thing. Then there's moving the goalpost. When it comes to global warming, for example, global warming, there are a couple of things you can say that are plausible and falsifiable. One, is the world getting warmer over time? Two, does it correlate with human activity with regard to carbon? The answer to both those is yes. What is the level of causation is still an open question. What is a conspiracy theory is where they say the world's going to end in 2012. And then it doesn't end in 2012, Greta Thunberg style. And then you're like, okay, well, it didn't. And she's like, well, I really meant 2024. And then it doesn't. And then it's like, well, what I really meant was 2036. You see this in Nostradamus a lot. Okay, well, just move the timeline out. Just move the timeline out. Okay, well, usually in the real world, if you have a predictive fail, you have to revise your theory. In conspiracy thinking, you simply revise the prediction. One of the most common tactics here is circular reasoning. So what you say is, we know that you're corrupt because you won't report on this conspiracy theory. And we know the conspiracy is real because you won't report on the conspiracy theory. It's a closed logical loop. No external information is possible. You're lying because the conspiracy theory is true. The conspiracy theory is true because you're lying. And around the circle you go. And at no point does evidence ever enter the equation at any point. Then there's the Kafka trap. The Kafka trap is named after Franz Kafka's short story, The Trial, where denial of guilt is taken as evidence of guilt. This is so common on X. So you'll say, no, I'm not involved in a conspiracy, nor do I think that conspiracy is credible. Say that, because you're involved in the conspiracy. That's why. So it goes directly, it's a character attack, essentially. It makes the accusation unfalsifiable because whether you deny or whether you confirm, both taken as confirmation. Denial, silence, and confirmation are all the same under the Kafka trap. If somebody accuses you of complicity, for example, in putting microchips in the blood of your enemies, and you deny it, well, you're only denying it because it's true. And if you confirm it, it's because it's true. And if you stay silent, it's because you won't answer, because it's probably true. That's the Kafka trap. There's information overload as well. So you see this a lot. When challenged for evidence, what you will get is a bunch of unrelated gobbledygook facts that are stacked on top of each other super fast. That sort of thing is very difficult to combat because it's sort of the equivalent of a terrorist rocket barrage. It's a bunch of $50 rockets that are sent up, and then it requires $50,000 in Iron Dome to take down each one of those argumentative rockets. And by the time you've done that, they're already firing the next argumentative rocket. That has nothing to do with the central argument, but is incredibly time-consuming. And so people just sort of give up to defending the truth because it's so tiring. Again, good tactic, bad logic. Another tactic here, weaponizing doubt. Conspiracy theorists excel at weaponizing doubt. So what they will do here is they find a minor error in the official account of an event, and then they're like, okay, well, the entire thing is wrong. So they'll say, well, there were initial reports from the government. They got the time wrong by 5 minutes. That means the whole report is BS. The whole report is flawed. This usually comes right after an event. So right after a complex event is reported, there are usually errors. This is why the best thing you can do on X or anywhere else in social media, when there's a controversial event, wait 48 hours. Wait 48 hours to comment on it, because usually it takes a while for the truth to be established. But what usually happens is people jump to a conclusion. That conclusion is then used to discredit the actual truth because somebody made a mistake when they first reported the thing. Okay, then there's false equivalence. Again, this is a defense mechanism for a bad conspiracy theory, where you say all sources are equally biased. Sure, my evidence comes from some schlub in a YouTube video who doesn't know anything about the topic and has no credentials and hasn't studied anything, but also the legacy media lies. Okay, well, yes, the legacy media does lie. That does not mean that all people are equally dishonest or that all cases are equally verifiable or have equal veracity. You have to actually establish this by the evidence. Okay, the reality is that people say, after COVID, I don't trust my doctor. I promise you that if you break your leg, you trust your doctor much more than you trust the random guy on the internet who may have been right, by the way, about the COVID vaccine. Because the reality is that it depends what you're talking about, depends the topic, it depends the level of expertise. Trying to equate everything, to flatten everything is a great way of making everything unfalsifiable. Another tactic, the no true Scotsman tactic. This is where somebody says, no true conspiracy researcher would deny the moon landing was faked. Right, which allows the community to maintain ideological purity. You just exclude a dissenter. You say that person is not actually a member of our community. They're not pure enough. Okay, then there is the deep play and the Mott and Bailey. Again, you see these tactics all the time. The deep play is really devious. This is where every debunking becomes evidence of a deeper conspiracy. So the fact that the legacy media is so intent on focusing on this theory, it shows that they're hiding something. The fact that they keep spending time on this thing that I'm bringing up, it shows that they're part of it. And then there's the Mott and Bailey tactic. So this is usually where somebody will make a totally implausible claim, like the government is run by lizard people. And you're like, well, that's not true. The government is not run by lizard people. And then they will say that would be the Bailey, like the outside of a castle. And then when that's overrun, they'll say, well, I'm just claiming that the government lies to us sometimes. Okay, like I agree, the government lies to us sometimes, but that does not justify your main claim. Now, again, in all of this, I am not saying that questioning established narratives is bad. We have to do it. Skepticism is healthy, but a healthy skepticism is rooted in a request for evidence. There's a world of difference between evidence-based skepticism and just stringing together random events, or stretching the truth beyond what it can bear, or speculation. These are not the same thing. Skepticism leads to better understanding through a search for actual truth and evidence. And if you're not doing that, then you're just entering an intellectual rabbit hole from which pretty much nobody returns. So that QED framework that I just outlined, fake questions, fake evidence, fake defenses, it's a great way to distinguish between legitimate inquiry and the just asking questions kind of conspiracy thinking. This is not about left versus right. You see this all across the political spectrum, like all across it. The difference is how we approach all of this. We need to approach all of this with an intellectual rigor. We need to actually be willing to change our minds based on actual evidence. You have to hold your own side to the same standards. And by the way, this is a great way of telling who exactly is lying to you and who is not. If people keep insisting they don't need to provide you evidence, they're just asking questions, or if they just retail theories without any evidence to support them, and then use any of the tactics that we've just discussed, it is an excellent way of telling who actually cares about the truth and who does not, and who's making money off of you, because this stuff tends to go viral, particularly things that confirm your pre-existing bias. So the next time you hear somebody throw out a wild theory, maybe the theory is true if they can provide you evidence, and this is what you should ask. Are they asking real questions? Is it a real, serious question? Are they presenting real, serious, credible, verifiable evidence? Are they open to real critiques that might actually correct the theory? If the answer to any of those is no, you might want to click somewhere else. So today, I wanted to have on somebody to talk about the JFK assassination who literally wrote the book on the JFK assassination. That's Gerald Posner. He's the author of the book Case Closed, which is the first book that I read that really put to bed a lot of my questions about the JFK assassination and the various conspiracy theories. Again, I spent a lot of time on this when I was at Harvard Law School and came to the conclusion it was Oswald, which is why I no longer find this topic all that fascinating, but it's fascinating, obviously, to tens of millions of Americans. I sat down with Gerald Posner today to talk over the various conspiracy theories surrounding the JFK assassination. Gerald, thank you so much for stopping